All right, so our server is running successfully. We got our project set up. Now let's actually create the links app and create the link model so we can get those stored in our database. So let's stop the server, Control C, and then let's create this app links. So we'll say Python manage.py start app, all one word, and we'll say links. And then we're going to have to go into our project, so config settings.py, and into our installed apps here, we'll add this new app we just added. So we'll say local apps, and then we will say links. And remember that trailing comma. Okay, so now our project knows about our links app. And the next thing we can do is create the link models to store our links in the database. So we can close this config directory and get out of settings.py, and we can go into links, into models.py, and here we can create our models. So what we want to do here is save a shortened link in the database. And so some of the properties it'll have are name, URL, the long URL, the slug, which we'll discuss, clicks, the number of clicks that each of these shortened links have. So we can get started with creating this model. And we do that again by just creating a class, and we can call it link, and it will inherit from models.model. And then any variable we add to this, any attribute, will be a field in the table. So we want that name, and this will be a models.char field, and we have to specify max length here, and we can do something like 50, and we want each name to be unique. We want each link to have a unique name, and so we can also pass in unique equals true, and Django will enforce the uniqueness. And then the next thing we want is the URL. So this is the actual long link to the URL we want the user to go to when they click our shortened link. And this is a models.url field. So this will enforce making sure that whatever saved is a valid URL. And we have to specify the max length again, and we can just say this is 200. And then we want the slug here, which a slug is a newspaper term, and it's a URL friendly string basically, so that in the URL name in the browser address bar, we can use this to look up the item instead of having to go /1. So instead of having to go mysite.com/link/1 to get the details for the first link, we could do something like name of link and get that specific link details. And it's a bit more user friendly and looks a bit nicer. So we'll use that, a slug field. So slug equals models.slug field. And here again, unique equals true, because if there were duplicates, then we wouldn't know which actual link we wanted to look up. And we also want to say blank equals true. And this makes it so that it's not necessary to have this value, but that's because we will auto calculate this slug based on the name, and we will replace any spaces with hyphens. So if we have my first link as the name, then when we create the slug, it'll look something like this, my first link, so that it's URL friendly. And we'll handle that in a second, but the last thing we want to store is the number of clicks. So we'll just save this as clicks, and this will be just a number. Models.positive integer field, and default will be 0. So it'll start at 0, and then each time this link gets clicked, we'll just increment this by 1. And so we will also define the dunder string method, which is how this will get rendered to a string in things like the admin, so that it's easier for us to understand which link object we're looking at. And so instead of just it being like link object 1 like this, we'll return something that's a bit more descriptive. So we will return an f string here so we can pass in some variables, and we'll say self.name, and then a pipe sign and self.clicks. And then we can also create methods on these models to interact with the model and create these methods to do things that would be repetitive. So like we're going to want to increment this clicks by 1 every time somebody clicks on it. So instead of having to manually increment that each time, we can just create a method that does that, and then we can just call the method and have it increment each time. So we can call this click, and it takes in self, so that will be the instance of this class. And we could say self.clicks plus equals 1, so increment by 1, and then self.save. So it will increment this clicks field for this instance of the link by 1, and then it will save that instance, that row in the table. So that is a nice method that we can use. And then the last thing we want to do is set up this slug field so that it works automatically, and so that this slug is auto-generated from this name field. And we can do that by overriding the save method, and it takes self and then args and keyword args. And then what we can do here is check if somebody entered a slug when creating the link. And if they didn't, then we can automatically create one from the name. So we can say, if not self.slug. So if there isn't a slug, then self.slug equals, and we will use something called slugify, which we'll have to import from Django, self.name. And then we can just return super save with the args and the keyword args. So this would continue on and save it as normal with this slug field. And we have to import slugify. So this is a utility that comes from Django. So from django.utils, import slugify. And all slugify does is it will take a string, and any spaces or periods, it will turn them into dashes, so they're URL friendly. And then we just call this save method that will finalize and save the instance. Awesome. So now we have our models set up. Now we can actually start to create some links. So the next things we're going to do in the next video is make our migrations and get our admin set up so we can start creating some links. So look forward to seeing you in the next video.